Hello, hello. Welcome everybody back to Let the Rest Burn. I am on today with someone I actually just met this year, Angeline. She is a women's power and confidence coach, and she is a force to be reckoned with. When I tell you how amazing it was to get to know her and to also hear her speak her truth, she's a projector, everybody. It was fabulous. And I can't wait to dig into what makes you you. Angeline, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. So why don't you introduce yourself? Let my audience know who you do, what you're about, who you are. Give us a little rundown.
Awesome. So, as you mentioned, I'm a power coach for women. I focus primarily on women because our challenges are a little bit different than men. Of course, we all have challenges, especially inside of the patriarchy, but those challenges look a little bit different. So I focus with women and womb work and women's challenges and empowerment in the systems that we live in. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a controller in finance and accounting.
Yes.
And so I wear many hats.
Yes, you
do. Yeah, that's my work in the world is helping women come into themselves as their own authority and their sovereignty.
Ooh, I love those words. Tell me a little bit more about the womb healing. I know that's something you've kind of tapped into, but I've heard that so often. What does that look like? What is that?
So the biggest challenge for women was the disconnection from our womb wisdom. And that has been carrying on for, thousands of years, the disconnection from that. And so actually tapping back into that space with the felt sense and being able to communicate with that space. There's a consciousness there that we've been disconnected from for eons. And we don't have the systems and the support in place to reconnect with that wisdom like we did back in the days before it really took hold and the witch burnings and all of that disconnected us from that wisdom. And so I work a lot with women with unraveling a lot of what is being held there in the programs and the beliefs and the consciousness and the sub-personalities that exist there that have been implanted from the systems and the way that we've been conditioned and raised, and helping them come back into the natural core essence of their own wisdom, truth, and voice in that space.
Ah, wow. That's super powerful. Okay. I think I hear this a lot. Like I hear the womb healing and it's appealing to me. Obviously, I'm a mother as well, a woman. And I love how you've connected it to a bunch of different pieces, because I think sometimes people get fixated on, this is one path, right? Like you've got the confidence, you've got the power, you've got the understanding of the history and the culture behind it. And I just love that you integrate that into your work. So it's really, really powerful.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit of when I invite my guests on this show, right? Like I want to talk about what you do. I want to dig into some of those pieces, but I also want to dig into you as a person, right? And what made you who you are today, and the woman who can sit in front of us and say, I'm going to bring you power and confidence. I'm going to help you heal your womb. Like that's some badassery right there, right? So what did you have to do? What did you have to burn along the way, let go of, release in order to be the woman you are today?
Everything.
Yes.
This goes back, 8 years. I was in a marriage with a man that I thought was my soulmate. I had given over all of my authority to, basically, where I just kept thinking, the more that I give up of myself, or the more I sacrifice of myself, the more I'm going to feel this hole inside of myself and feel loved. And, it goes back to, layer upon layer in that relationship of the abandonment wounds from my father when I was little. And so not loving myself and not putting myself first had me sacrificing everything financially, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, like every area of a being, I had lost myself. And it was after I had my son and I realized, okay, this was a messed up situation for me, but it gave me a different perspective of being like, I'm not going to have this child raised in this type of a situation. Like, it gave me a different lens and to find the power to get out of that situation. And it was just a really horrible situation where there was zero accountability on his side. And I basically took all the marital debts. He kept the house. And I claimed bankruptcy, which had so much shame around it because I'm an accountant. I know red, when you're in the red, I know like all the financial information, but because I didn't have that core power and authority within myself to say, I'm not going to let you charge on these credit cards. I'm not going to let you buy this stupid shit. Like, I'm not going to sacrifice all of these things and at the expense of just trying to fill this hole and like feel love from you. Like, I was afraid. I was so overgiving and I was so people pleasing and so afraid that he wanted to buy this drone or whatever he wanted to buy. And I would be like, no, then I would lose his love. So it was like, I was constantly giving in to things that I was going against myself of knowing was right. And I mean, I take full responsibility for that. These were my own patterns as well. It was just the two of us together was like super, super toxic. And so I lost all the equity in the house. I had to claim bankruptcy, took all of the debts. And now I had a child on my hip, an 8-month-old that I had to figure it out with. And I had to rebuild that. I had to move through the shame of bankruptcy. I wasn't able to buy a house when the market was, not crazy. And then now that my, finances have recovered and my credit, now it's like, it's just exploded, So there's times when I'm like, oh, that was really crappy. I shouldn't have given him all of the equity and done it the way that I did. But a lot of that was so that like, there was a clean break there. And, I look back and I hear friends talk about horrible situations with their exes and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that. So I had to basically burn down everything that I had built in my life up to that point and burn down all of the aspects and integrate all of the aspects of myself that were wounded to allow those patterns to take place in the first place. So all of the people pleaser, all of the overgiving, all of the self-sacrificial, self-abandonment to try to find love internally and build that love for myself first, and understand where my authority lies, and that also includes religion. There was a lot of religion stuff and in there as well that I had to deconstruct and remove and finally put myself as the authority spiritually, financially, emotionally, physically, every sense of the word, build a completely different foundation for my life and what that means for me to never experience that again. Like, to never give all of myself away like that again. And I've experienced more love than I ever did in that past relationship from loving myself first. There's a different level of being able to receive and give when I am the core of my authority. I don't have an intermediary in that exchange or that foundation. Like, I am standing both feet planted on that foundation instead of expecting somebody else to give me that foundation.
Ooh, that's some powerful words right there. That's some powerful words. I want to, number one, commend you for doing that and having the courage to do that, because you say it now from a place of confidence and power, but I know what it feels like in the moment to make those choices. It doesn't feel as confident as it does when we're looking back on it, right? There's so much doubt. There's so much back and forth. There's so much like up and down. And, I've navigated divorce as well. And it's one of those things that I find that you question your inner truth in the process. I mean, obviously you get stronger and stronger in your core. You recognize the reasons you did what you did, but it is such a challenge in the moment when you know it, the truth deep in your body, the truth, but it's so challenging to act from that place. And I think it comes back again to what you said in the beginning, like really connecting with your womb, really connecting with your deep knowing, really connecting back to your core sense of self. Then it kind of disrupts those shadows from taking over and running the show.
It was interesting too when I started to actually do a lot of the womb work when I started going through my coaching training, because I had repressed trauma, and I didn't remember it. I was drugged and assaulted. And so I when I come out of it, it was like I just kind of pushed it aside, and there was like shame and stuff of not knowing what happened and like thinking the worst of the situation. But then it was like as I started connecting with my womb, and you know, when the Brock Turner case happened, you know, I was like super triggered. I was like, something's going on here. And I was in the coaching, connecting, like the coaching training, connecting to my womb. And I was like, oh, there's a lot of trauma here. Started seeing a therapist, started doing EMDR, working through the things in coaching and in therapy. And and I'll give you an example. I was also at that time training for a bikini competition. And part of that is being able to know how to pose and how, like, doing a certain walk and certain kind of like stage presence in that experience. And I noticed when I came out of my first EMDR therapy session, my walk was different. My hips were moving differently. Like, so when we have trauma in, like, because it's not just in our brain, it like lives in our body, and your body moves and reacts with that trauma. So it was very interesting when I walked out of there. I noticed my hips swaying differently, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, that was when I realized how much I had been carrying of that trauma.
Wow. I think it's so powerful. Hold on, my dog is barking. Hold on, Haley, we'll have you mute this out. Hold on. There's like a dog walking by. He just feels it necessary to announce that he's here. Okay. So I think what I want to really highlight there that you said that's super powerful is you physically feel the difference when you do this work, when you heal these wounds. And, you know, trauma to your body, and in particular to your womb space, and especially when drugs are involved or an assault is involved, takes the somatic healing in order to move through it. We can mentally move through it to a degree, but you have to heal your body. And I do find that as we, you know, burn the parts of our life that no longer align, the things that need to be healed start to come to the surface. Like we start to recognize, okay, these are some unresolved things that I need to work through. These are the things I need to see. So it's like this half of the story is this empowerment and this reclamation of self as you walk away from things that no longer align with you. And the other half of the story is actually starting to do some of the deeper work and healing the pieces of you that need to be healed, because now you're in a safe position to actually unpack those. So tell me, like, when did you get the spark for wanting to shift into this coaching world, right? It sounds like you're an accountant, you've done money stuff. Like what sparked this for you?
So it's an interesting story because I used to be a Beachbody coach, which is
yes, I know Beachbody.
So I was a Beachbody coach, which was almost the beginning of my empowerment. My husband at that time, my ex-husband, he was just kind of really against it. He didn't like me doing it, but I had lost a lot of weight and like totally transformed my physical body after having my son. And so I wanted to like share that with other women. And so I would have groups and stuff, and I would run these groups with these women. And I just loved seeing the women come into their confidence and loving their bodies. Like that piece of it was so fulfilling to me. But like trying to grow that business and have other coaches join you. Yes. Like I was very successful in getting women results physically and them loving themselves and transforming their relationship with themselves. But I was not successful in the way that you have to earn money in that business. And so I was kind of wondering like, what next? And my teacher for my coaching certification, Layla Martin, she sent out an email talking about her program, teacher training that she was launching. And I just read that email and like, I cried. Like I knew this was it. Like I had not even thought about going into this work or doing any of this stuff, but like for something in that email just spoke to me on such a soul resonance level that it was like, this is your next step. Like I didn't have the money to join that program, like all sorts of things. And when I decided like, this is it, I'm going to do it. Like I'm going to figure out a way, like the universe moved. Like my credit was set up. I could refinance my car to have the monthly payment. Like I sued my ex for some divorce settlement that he owed me. I mean, it was a small amount, but that like extra $150 a month made or breaked like so much for me. So, you know, just like things started moving once I decided, and I was like, I'm going to do it. So taking that aligned action.
I love that. And I think Two things. Number one, like, how did you get so sure? You felt it in your body, right? You felt it in your body. You felt the response. What does it look like for you to feel that and then take aligned action? Because I know people can feel a hell yes, like they can feel it, but there's that next step that we struggle to make. What would you say, like, you feel it in your body, the next step is to really affirm to the universe, like, this is what I want? What do you recommend people do?
I think the biggest thing, and I teach this a lot in my work, is deciding, like, the timeline that allows the universe and our higher selves and like whatever to like start manifesting. It starts with the decision. Like once you decide, that is when the timeline takes place for you to do the quantum jumping, for you to do all of the energetics, for you to do all of those things. And so the decision is what really is important. And sometimes you have to like redecide, because I've also been in situations where I'll feel that and then like it'll be super potent and powerful and I'll maybe take a little bit of action and then the fears get a little bit louder and I kind of let it fizzle, you know? But like for this one, I made the decision and I just kept coming back to like, I know this is where I'm supposed to go. Like, I know that this is what I'm supposed to do and I'm going to find a way. Like,
yes.
I'm going to just keep allowing the openness of possibility that this can happen for me. Like I'd already been to the bottom, right?
Yes.
So I was like, there's only going up, and I'm just going to like bet on myself and take the chance. Like instead of, because a lot of times, you know, in the past I had given away my authority. Like I would look for validation in my ex. Is this something good that I could do? Or I would fight for it when he was like fighting against me. And so I had a little bit of that resolve of like, I'm going to do something and make it happen. And I didn't have anybody fighting against me. Like, I guess that was what's also such a beautiful thing, is making that decision and deciding this. And of course, it doesn't make sense to other people. Like there was somebody that I had spoken to and they were like, you can't transfer these credits like a traditional educational system and, you know, things like that. So there were other people in my head being like, this is ridiculous. This is nonsense. Like, what are you doing? But I just knew like my pieces had aligned inside of myself that this is what I needed to do. And so I just kept taking that action and kept deciding this is what I'm going to do. And I started to get creative about how can I make this happen? And so it was like looking in, okay, has my credit improved enough? Could I refinance my car? And then being like, okay, there's this money owing to me. So I took him to court and got that settlement going. And, you know, and then was able to negotiate the payment plan with the school and stuff like that. So the pieces are available if we get creative enough and we're decided enough and we trust ourselves enough. I think that is one of the big things, is like trusting yourself, like understanding that we get that impulse, knowing for a reason, like our body. And that's the thing too, is like, even when we have trauma, like sometimes we get triggered and we're moving from a response and we may have a story around that. And our story may be inaccurate of what's happening, but our body is not going to lead us astray. And that was also something that I had to work through with like my trauma healing and everything, was like, I'm triggered about something and the story that I'm making it mean may not be accurate, but like understanding my body is giving me a signal for a reason and to honor that signal.
Yes. Yes. I love that. That's so powerful. And such a piece of misunderstanding we have about the body, right? There's so often I hear people say, you know, my body is betraying me, or my body is, not understanding, or I'm fighting with my body, you know, and it's like, no, your body is just giving you a message. The story that you have about that message or the interpretation of that message is actually the issue, right? It's your body has no maladaptive like desires here. It's literally just telling you what's happening in real time. And trauma often is stored in the body and creates a response that is maybe heightened to what the reality is. But all you have to do is actually tune in and give your body the attention it needs in order to shift it and to heal it and to process through it. And I think money trauma in particular is one of those that is so pervasive and people don't understand how covert it is. Like I'll give you an example of this, just because I think it would be really cool to hear you riff on this and how you would handle this in your coaching. I have some clients who, we all understand money trauma when we don't have it, right? It's like, makes sense. We've got to figure out how to be in an abundant mindset, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what I find really interesting, what I'm seeing as I'm stepping into the bigger coaching masterminds and classes and things like that, is what happens when you receive a bunch of money and how your nervous system reacts to that. So how would you handle, or what would you say to someone who they're like, this opening happened for me, right? The universe is giving me what I want. And now my body is giving me like panic, right? Like I'm feeling experiences of fight or flight, and I have all of this money coming towards me. What is going on?
Yeah. I always go back, hopefully this is okay on your podcast. I always go back to sex because I feel like it is
very okay.
of what's happening in our body, right?
Yes, yes.
Money trauma is similar to orgasmic trauma, right? When a woman is having a hard time, or a man, when somebody is having a difficult time experiencing an orgasm or surrendering to that shift to go into an orgasm because their nervous system can't hold it because of trauma. And that's the same thing with money, is what is blocking that expansion of receiving and holding more is your nervous system trauma blocking it. Like it's the same thing. It's an expansion. That's what happens with orgasm, is you are expanding in your nervous system the level of pleasure that you are experiencing, that you have that shift in your body that feels that explosion, or you experience a type of orgasm. That's the same thing for money. You'll get that infusion, and then it's like your nervous system can't expand with it, can't hold it, and so it's going to like push it away, kind of like the chasing in an orgasm, right? Like I'm feeling close, but then it's like I have trauma there, I can't expand anymore, I'm bumping against a trauma or a lost aspect of myself because of the trauma. And so then it like drops down, and you have to kind of rebuild that pleasure back up in your nervous system, but you're going to keep hitting that limit of that trauma.
Ooh, yes. So how do we heal that? What do we do? How do we expand it? How do we get rid of that so we can receive all the orgasms and pleasure and money that we want? What do we do? Tell us.
So it depends on everybody. Like each person's trauma lives a little bit differently within themselves, right? And so like for me, when I was experiencing the orgasm blocks trauma, it was because there was an aspect of myself that was leaving when I would like disassociating, when I would get close to that orgasmic experience, that shift taking place in my body and my nervous system to have that orgasmic experience. And so it's about being able to get into the body to find out what that limit is, what's going on with that trauma. What is that block that is keeping you from moving beyond that point of expansion, and integrating it, bringing it back, and shifting the aspects and releasing, discharging whatever trauma is also associated with whatever charge is also still active in the body around that block and that trauma.
And for those that are listening, like, this might be new language for you all. I'm like, yes. The ways to do this are varied and different. Breathwork is extremely powerful for this. I'm getting certified now. I'm literally just like a fangirl of breathwork right now.
Because it does more things in the body is what EMDR therapy does. Having experienced both of those, it was like EMDR is just like a shortcut, like, right? To getting the brain to process whatever's locked on the one side of the brain, to moving across into the different sections of the brain that stores the memory or whatever. So it's not present happening now. It becomes more of like a memory experience.
Yes.
Breathwork does very similar, but it can take you 20 minutes, a half an hour to get deep enough into the breathwork experience to actually get into the brain waves or whatever's going on with the relaxation of the brain to actually start moving that. But there's a lot that you can discharge in the body through breath work. So, I mean, it is a powerful, potent modality. So I think that you mixing that with your stuff is awesome.
I can't wait. It's so incredible. And when we're talking breath work, we're not talking just deep breathing. There's all sorts of patterns and things that activate your vagus nerve. And I highly encourage anybody who's interested to look into it. And yes, it's going to be part of my treatment modality as well as EMDR. But there's so many ways to get into this, everyone. I want you to know that. And breathwork, EMDR, somatic experiencing, whatever it is you choose, don't do it alone. Like, period. We are meant to do this in community. We're meant to do this with mentorship. We're meant to do this with leaders, guiding the path through the fire, like people who have been through the fire and they're like, this is the path around it or through it. I got you. It's extremely important. Self-leadership is part of it, but I'm telling you, when you're going against these deeply ingrained shadows that are stored in your body that are keeping you from having the life that you want, you should never have to do that alone. And this is why, Angeline and I both actually connected, is we're in this community of women who are doing this work and who are doing this work together. And it's such an important part of healing. And I think it's like the new frontier of healing, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because in our coach training, right, like a lot of, it wasn't just learning the modality. It was like the whole beginning part of the training was us going through all of these things for like self-deepening, self-understanding our own nervous system, regulating ourselves, resourcing ourselves, like this massive transformation of self first before we ever got into any of the coaching tools. And a lot of that meditation and practices was breath work. But I can tell you that doing that on my own versus when we got into a group and doing it together, it's a very different experience of experiencing that and moving the breath work through yourself through like even a meditation, a guided meditation or something, versus when you're in a group and there's waves that end up happening in the collective experience when you're doing a breath work experience like that, where you'll be experiencing something and it's like the group together will ride a wave. Like it's very interesting. It's almost like our nervous systems will sync with each other and will, if you have something that somebody else is releasing, it could trigger that release within yourself. And that's also why doing it with people who are experienced in trauma, experienced in handling the nervous system, experiencing and helping people move through different triggers and stuff that comes up is so important and a requirement, that I would say, because when you're experiencing it in a group and somebody else is releasing something that triggers a release in you, to fully for people to be aware and see what's going on with your experiencing, to know that you're fully discharging that and you're not going to walk away from that experience and have a meltdown that night or a panic attack or something,
Yes. And this is, I think this is the piece about when I started this podcast and I was like, I want people to understand what it is to be in your full power, to ask for a full life. How often are we told to just be comfortable with enough? Like I love gratitude. So let me say that out loud. Gratitude is an essential part of our practice in order to really deepen into what is currently happening. But there's also a dark side to it of like, well, just be grateful for what you have and don't ask for more, right? Like this is, look at everything that you have. Look at the country you live in. Look at the resources you have. Look at the color of your skin. Look at, and I am extremely grateful. I'm very aware of privilege. I'm very aware of the things that I have. And it's also okay for me to ask for more. It's both. It's not, it's and I think that those are the components that a lot of us struggle with is I get to have it all. I get to have this full expression of myself. I get to have orgasms and make money. What? Right? Like this is what I think, like your work, my work, this is what we're doing is we're teaching this to women. I teach this to men as well, but like this idea that we are inherently deserving of a life that is fulfilling. And we do not have to settle for less just because it makes other people uncomfortable.
Yes. And, like what I love about that too is it's not like there is that piece that it's like, I deserve this. I'm worthy of this. Like I'm meant for abundance and pleasure. Like, our clitoris has all of those nerve endings, like just for one single tool. It's not a multi-purpose tool like the penis is has way less nerves. Like we are built for pleasure. It is our birthright. And beyond that is when a woman is in her full self, like one of the beautiful things about women is it overflows into her community, into her family, into all the spaces that she's in. Like a woman who is in her authority and in her power and has done the work, she is uplifting everybody else.
Yes.
Like a wealthy woman, that wealth is going to expand beyond herself. Like, people are like, women shouldn't have money because of blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, women should have money because they transform their communities. They transform the spaces around them when they have resources, when they are fulfilled themselves and in overflow themselves, everything around them experiences overflow.
I agree. And this is what the world is meant to be. And I mean, look at nature, right? Nature overflows into itself consistently. That's why it coexists with each other. It's this beautiful, like, My favorite example of this is trees, right? Like they just like they're interconnected through their root system and they just flow into one another. And when one tree gets all of the resources, it shares it with the community. If one tree is sick and headed towards death, it sends out all of its resources to the trees around it so that they can prosper. It's powerful. And something I think I want to delineate here, you know me, I have the shadow archetypes that I talk about on this podcast right now. And the one for March is actually the people pleaser. And I think women can struggle with the people pleaser and the martyr. They're very similar. And this idea of like, how can I be in overflow? How can I ask for more and not get to that place and then slide into the people pleaser, right? We want to overflow into our community. We want to give. We want to spread our resources. But when is it too far? When do we get into the shadow people pleaser behavior? What are your thoughts?
So I could riff forever on this. Boundaries. Boundaries is so important because we are taught from a very young age to not have boundaries, to sacrifice ourselves. Like I remember a very vivid experience in high school where this guy had a crush on me and I wasn't really paying attention to him. And he called me stuck up and I was so offended. Like, that's not who I am. Like, I felt so unseen, but it was like, it's a cultural control dynamic to have girls lower our standards, right? Like to be like, oh, you think you're better than me. And then it creates shame within us. And so we lower those standards. But those standards, like if it feels natural for us or whatever, like whatever our standard is, like that's something within us telling us like, we should hold those standards. Like it's there for a reason. Like to find the people who are matches for us or like, you know, other parts that match with us. And so when we have these dynamics socially and culturally to have somebody give that up, and, from young age, girls are taught, the way that, girls and boys are raised in our culture, there's quite a few differences. A lot more is expected from girls. We're expected to sacrifice a lot more, to overgive, to share differently, and think of ourselves last.
Yeah.
And so it's ingrained from us from such a young age to be the people pleaser, to be the overgiver. And, I think that that's part of the work. There's that wounded healer within us, right? A lot of us many, many lifetimes as healers and things like that. And there's a lot of wounds, I could get really woo-woo into this stuff, but I think a big piece of that is boundaries. And I was actually talking to a girlfriend yesterday about one of her friends who's in a difficult spot financially and was talking about, should I co-sign for her for a place, like all these things. And it was like, we really had to go into this about the wounded healer, the savior complex of trying to save this person that she cared a lot about. And it really comes down to like feeling into yourself of like, if this goes bad or if this situation happens, is this going to be an overextension of myself? Because that's actually what it is. You're not just looking at, I'm helping this person. It's okay. If this, I do want to help this person, but is going to this extent, the level that is going to benefit all of us. Right.
Yes.
She could make calls. She has connections where she could help her overcome some of the challenges. And that's a great way to help somebody, but to overextend yourself, maybe like giving money, like that's going to make you suffer for paying your own rent or something like that. Those are overgiving. And I think that it takes doing the work, the embodied experience, right? Of saying, oh, I wanted to do this. And the way that I justified that in this situation is I was only thinking about this or blah, 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 whatever we're giving ourselves to justify that overgiving, is to have the awareness of that pattern and see how we're doing it and readjust the boundaries around those situations. And it's not just something that you can just decide. It's something that you have to have that felt sense, that experience and communication and awareness within your body in those situations of what's taking place in your body. Because if you're only thinking from the mind, your mind is going to think one way versus what's happening in your body. Your body's going to be feeling something different, having a different level of understanding, giving you different signals. It's really about awakening, understanding what those signals are, and the communication of the body, how the body is communicating to you. It's a body awareness intelligence that you are increasing as you're working through those archetypes, those behavioral patterns in your life.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think A lot of times we are taught to leave our body. And I'd say men and women experience this equally, just in different ways. We're
Mm-hmm.
taught to leave our body and step into our mind. And the relearning of how to step back into your body is super important for making any decisions and shifting those patterns. And this is where traditional therapy for me just doesn't cut it. You know, we can talk about it all day, we can shift belief systems, but if you're not experiencing it in your body, if you're not doing the work to get back into your body, you're going to just repeat the same things. And then on top of that, you're going to experience shame on
Mm-hmm.
top. And that shame shuts everything down, right? We can't move when we're in shame. And so getting back into your body, being in stillness, doing the work. If you're listening to this podcast and you're like, I've done these things, ladies, I've done these things. I really want you to ask yourself, what scares the absolute shit out of you when it comes to the work? Okay. And I'm going to give you an example here. There's a reason I'm doing the breathwork certification. What scares the absolute shit out of me is to have anybody tell me how to breathe. And I had asthma as a kid. I've had allergies forever. I live in Colorado, so it's like a consistent and constant allergy, dry grossness that's happening here. And to have somebody tell me, okay, now do these type of breaths or shift this type of breath, it made me feel trapped and afraid and scared and controlled. And I was like, ooh, I got to move towards that. I got to move towards that because there is something happening that I need to explore. Now, I am saying this all within reason. My dears, please do not move towards anything abusive or toxic. Obviously, like there's a caveat here. I mean more in the healing world, right? Like if it scares you to like pull an oracle card and sit with yourself and ask yourself and connect to spirit, let's explore that. If it scares you to tell another person your vulnerable truth, let's explore that. Like let's go towards the things that we're actually avoiding. If you feel really great listening to podcasts and reading books and telling nobody that you're struggling, you're going to stay in the same place, right? I'm glad you're getting the information and the tools, but move towards the discomfort.
Yeah. And it's interesting, my experience seeing women who want to do this work, who want to join coaching, but they have this fear of what's going to happen in my relationship. Like if I'm healing and I'm changing,
yes,
we're going to break up because my partner is not also. But what I have seen that's fascinating is when the core of the person is healing and shifting and changing, it's like the partner just kind of like absorbs certain levels of that. Like, for example, I had a client recently. We were doing a lot of work around her self-worth in the workplace and getting a new job. And she increased, tens of thousands of dollars in her annual salary to move into this new job. And it was like, then her husband also had an experience where he had a major up level in his job. So it's like, just from her doing the work, the household income, that like he saw the benefit of her work too, like her mindset shifting, her body shifting, the groundedness in her value and what she felt like her family could actually be capable of obtaining and receiving and living a different level of experience. He absorbed that as well. And so like, if you have what's typically a healthy relationship where you guys are able to communicate and navigate through the shifts that the individual is having, the other person's going to up level too. So it becomes something that people avoid and they're afraid of. And usually that's also a sign of like, okay, there's conversations that you guys are not having, or you're not feeling that your partner is supportive in your individual growth and strengthening, which is also another conversation that you should be having.
Very much so. Yes. Ooh, I love that. The tie back to the partnership, because I completely agree with you. Like, and ultimately sometimes you do outgrow them and then you do what we did, right? We move on. We expand, we ask for more, and we find partners that better align. You have inspired me to find a better partner. I don't have one yet. I'm still single, but I believe that like keeping those standards high, doing the work, continuing to expand and asking for more is exactly what magnetizes money, partners, love, opportunity, growth into your world. Angeline, tell us, how can people work with you? How can they find you? How can they get into this like ooey gooey goodness that you have literally poured into their world today?
Yeah, so they can find me at my website, angelinepower.com, or Instagram at Angeline Alive, or TikTok at Angeline Power. So
Ooh.
I'm in those places.
I love that you're on TikTok. That's so fun. I literally just started a TikTok, the Evolved Therapist, and it's hilarious. So we're gonna see what happens with that. I'll be very curious.
Yeah.
What are you enrolling for? How can they work with you?
Yeah, so I have openings for my one-on-one self-actualization queen 6-month program that they can work one-on-one coaching with me, and we'll go through, of course, what they're coming to me for, but they're going to get a lot more than that. Like this woman who came to me because of self-worth around money, around her day job. She ended up having way more self-love, way more trust in herself, understanding the communication of what was happening. She came to me feeling so disconnected from her body, like she couldn't trust her body. And it was helping her understand that her body is always communicating to her, and how to start recognizing that and what the communication and language of the body actually is. And going on to making a lot more money, loving herself a lot more deeply, and like her relationship improving, just so much transformation. So you may be coming to me for one thing, but everything is going to get better. And then I'm going to be launching a group program here soon called Feral. And so they can go onto my website and get on the wait list for when that launches. But that's all about de-domesticating women outside of patriarchy. So getting ourselves outside of the boxes that patriarchy has us in, and absorbed and believe, and those patterns that we're replicating within ourselves.
I literally have goosebumps. I love it. I love it so much. I so appreciate you being on today. Thank you so much. Conversations with you are always extremely illuminating and empowering, and I walk away feeling more powerful and confident. So you are in the right field. You're doing the right things. I just thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be a guest on your podcast.
Absolutely.